Hi, friends. Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast. I think we can all admit that 2020 is not going as planned for anyone. When we experience times like these, we naturally look to our leaders for answers. And in this session, I'm thrilled to introduce four leaders of companies that are drawing on past experiences to inform how they respond to this current environment. Joining us are Howard Brown, founder and CEO of ringDNA, Sangram Vajre, co-founder and chief evangelist at Terminus, Brian Trautschold, co-founder of Ambition, and Sam East, CRO at Sendoso. Now, let's get into it.
All right. It's great to see you guys. During our discussions leading up to today's sessions, we talked about the additional challenges that leaders face during these incredibly uncertain times. It's harder to manage, right? We need to provide direction, guidance, and reassurance while at the same time acknowledging that the path ahead is quite unclear. Some suggestions that you guys brought up included being upfront and vulnerable, putting people first, and making certain that we connect and support with our team members wherever possible. Sangram, love to hear a little bit more about this.
Well, first of all, Howard, thanks for having me, and it's fun to talk about it because I think whatever we do and not do, we'll be telling that to our kids and our grandkids one day. So it's really important to actually choose whatever we're choosing and know that we're choosing there. But I think time has been one of the most important factor that we all have realized is more valuable than we thought. And when we think about this back-to-back Zoom calls, back-to-back conversations that we're having, I'm already seeing signs of burnout in our own organization, in our own teams, for myself, in many ways. So we have started to do things like, Friday half days for people to start taking that off and do that. We've started to have teams just block off 30 minutes on your team's calendar. And that 30 minutes is to go take a walk, take a nap, go spend time, play piano with your kids, whatever that needs to be done that you need, because there is no filter right now for people. So I think it's an important distinction to make for all of us is time is really important. And right now, because everybody is sitting and available, we may be just too much available, and we need to learn to turn off quite literally the things that we're using every day.
Yeah, it sounds like being more aware of people's individual needs during these times of stress and providing the flexibility for them to take that time off and for ourselves is really critical and something that you're trying to employ across your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I personally, for example, Friday at 7 p.m. And I think we talked about this when we were chatting about it earlier. At 7 p.m. I switch off my phone. I literally switch it off. And until after church on Sunday, that's the only time I'm starting to pick up. And now I have to do that. I'm not suggesting or recommending everybody do that because everybody's in a different place and different life. And I annoy the heck out of my wife, like, hey, what time is it? Is it going to rain? What happened? And she's like, well, I'm going to switch off my phone if you keep asking me these questions. I'm like, great. Like we, solve world problems are solved. But things like that, whatever it might seem extreme, and maybe that's what we need in some scenarios right now. But it's so important to figure out a way to balance it. And I'm finding myself more out of balance than ever before.
So this is breaking news. You've turned your wife into Siri? Is that what I'm hearing?
So, yep. And Siri, that will totally can hijack whatever I'm trying to do or not do. And it can be really dramatic impact of that. So it's not easy to just switch it off, Siri, and tell your wife so it's really interesting where our conversations are a little bit more deeper and more thoughtful. Your morning on a Saturday is actually longer than you would normally think it is. So there are things like that it needs us to just pause a little bit. That I think we're at home, but we're not pausing. We're at home, but we're faster than ever before. It's a very challenging balance to have right now, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, big fan, Sendoso, great product. You guys have pivoted recently to adjust to what's going on out there. How are you leading differently? What's going on, and how have you been able to provide sort of a rock or a foundation to your team during uncertain times?
Yeah. Well, firstly, Howard, again, thanks for inviting us all to this conversation. I've been really looking forward to this one. So firstly, I would definitely reiterate Sangram's point around time. I think that that is absolutely key. And allowing people to have time away from work and being flexible in the way that you manage people, I think is absolutely paramount right now. I think the other thing is to embrace the fact that this is hard. Like, we are running businesses, we're running teams, we're driving revenue in the middle of a global pandemic. None of us have done that before. And so I think acknowledging with your team that this is a challenging time, empathizing with them that this is a challenging time, and then being as supportive as you possibly can in every possible way. And managing with authenticity, I think, is really important. You know, it's about making time for your people to have authentic conversations that maybe aren't all about when is that deal coming in and, you know, have we spoken to Bob and, you know, have we sent an email to Sally? But maybe just how are you feeling right now and how are you working through this time and what's it like at home? You know, I think those conversations are really important to have right now. And making time to have those conversations with my team has been a big focus for me.
You know, it's one of those examples of how the greatest of qualities can emerge during the most challenging times, right? So
Absolutely.
it sounds like you're leading by providing empathy and support for your team, more listening, the kind of things that we want to instill in our children. And sometimes we talk about it, but we don't necessarily lead by example. And so it's great to hear you're doing that. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
How you doing, Howard? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you know, great leaders inspire, and I know you're one of them. So I'd love to hear your take. How have you been able to guide your team through these times?
Yeah, well, I think Sam and Sangram had really good points. I think, first of all, admitting that things are not what we expected for the year is just, that's the truth. No one came into the 2020 plan with, let's double revenue, let's increase headcount by X, let's go through this pandemic. Like, that is the reality. And I think that, you know, when you're trying to inspire, when you're trying to motivate and get everyone to march in the same direction or to go hit a goal, take a hill, you have to be really truthful with, like, here's the situation, and the situation has changed, the ground has changed around us. And, you know, one is, I think if you're out there and you're not a certain select few of companies, you have to be realistic on, like, what are we trying to do? What's our real win for right now? Mm-hmm. And what we've done at Ambition is we've tried to be very realistic about what is a win, communicating that from the board level to the leadership level to every individual, make sure that everyone knows what is a win now, and then talk about how they can impact that win. Because for me, you know, I'm rarely motivated by someone saying, hey, go jump this high. What I get motivated on is, like, when I'm inspired to go jump that high because of what everyone else is doing. So, you know, whether that's competition, whether that's we're all going to do it together. And, you know, for us, it's let's go do this. It's going to take every one of the 51 people at Ambition really excelling and working together to go do it. Let's make the goals and objectives as visible as possible. And then let's talk as often as possible about what we're going to do to go hit them. And so what Sam says specifically, like, we really have to be knowledgeable about what people are going through. We have to be, you know, knowledgeable about what we're going through, keeping ourselves in check. But for us, it's all about the transparency. It's all about making it measurable. And we're talking, in a weird way, I think we're talking more than we were talking before about how we're doing as a business and how we're doing as our goal, as our, you know, progress towards objectives. And I think that we're going to end up being able to hit them because everyone's on board.
That's great. Sam, I know in our previous conversations, you've talked about, you know, going through some of the challenges previously, the previous financial crisis, .com collapse, some of the lessons you took out of those that you're applying to the current pandemic and other uncertainties that we're facing now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have enough gray hair to demonstrate that I was leading teams both back in 2001 and 2008.
You had to go there. I got no hair left. Thank you.
And I think firstly, I definitely call on that experience, and I leverage that experience in how I manage my team on a daily basis. I do think this is a unique situation. It is its own thing. As I say, none of us have sold through this kind of environment before, but there are things that I've been able to take from that experience, especially in 2008. So 2001, I was managing a sales team at a startup web design and web marketing agency. So you couldn't have been any more in the eye of the storm than I was at that stage. And then 2008, I was managing a large inside sales team at a company called LoopNet. And LoopNet was the largest online marketplace for people buying and selling commercial real estate in the world. So real estate, 2008, that wasn't a great place to be as well. So I seem to be getting lucky with where I end up at times of great economic stress. But I think two things I took away, especially from LoopNet. Number one, from a leadership perspective, acknowledging that the people in your team, even the top performers, the people that were getting it done for you prior to, in 2008, obviously the economic crash, those top performers, the things that they were doing to find success prior to the turn in the economy weren't working after the economic crash, right? So how do you teach? How do you mentor? How do you encourage change? How do you get close enough to your top performers who are just used to being successful? They have a way of getting it done, and now that's not working anymore. How do you make sure you're right there with them in the trenches, teaching them how to get through this next stage? I think that's absolutely imperative. I think a lot of us as leaders, when you're, when you hit a tough time, quite often you can be distracted by focusing specifically on people that maybe were struggling prior to the change in the economy. I think you really have to make sure you're focused on your top performers as well. And then the second thing is more just from a sales and sales go-to-market approach. In 2008, we became obsessive about making sure we took advantage of every opportunity that was in front of us. Because the opportunities are limited. About half of our pipeline went away. It seemed like overnight, half of our pipeline disappeared. And so just sharpening every part of the process, using data to understand, where you can really improve. And then, just taking a laser focus to everything you're doing to make sure that you take advantage of every opportunity. I think those are the two biggest takeaways that I took from 2008 that I'm trying to apply on a daily basis right now.
And I definitely see it in your product. So as ringDNA is a user of Sendoso, which is about providing gifts and swag to your prospects at their place of work. When nobody's going to work, you guys shifted, and now I'm able to provide gifts and items to my prospects and customers in their homes. And what was incredibly innovative was the ability to provide that service while keeping their home address anonymous. So that's a perfect example of a leader taking your experience from the past and really going after an opportunity. And personally, it's shown great results. So not to pitch your product here, but it's been amazing, and congratulations on that pivot.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. I appreciate that. Yeah, I certainly can't take credit. That's more our product and eng teams that built that functionality. But we moved incredibly quickly, and both our customers and new prospects are seeing an absolute ton of ROI from leveraging that functionality. So yeah, it's great to work at a company that's so nimble that they can react that quickly and still drive amazing value for our customers.
Yeah. So Sangram, I watch your podcast. I've been paying attention to your movement, Flip the Funnel. you always come across to me as someone that has a pretty good understanding of yourself, both of your strengths and weaknesses, and you're pretty incredible and transparent. How can you talk a little bit about sort of either personal or business crisis that you've gone through that you've been able to navigate to the other side, and how you were able to navigate that, and what parts of your personality sort of rose to the top, and what parts did you maybe not feel so proud about, but learn more about yourself?
There's so much well, thanks for saying what you said. I will try to wire you the money right after this. For that. And maybe I'll use Sendoso for it because they keep the address anonymous to get it done. But here, something, I'll just share a personal part of it, which was extremely hard. As a co-founder of a company, as we grew from 3 co-founders to about now 250 people in the last 5 years, I felt like, oh great, I'm doing this, I'm doing marketing, sales, customer success, I'm writing books, I'm speaking. It just felt like everything I want to do, I could do, which if you follow that, that's like a really bad example and a bad way to get to a point where everything is overwhelming and the world just starts spinning so fast that you don't have a stable place to stand from and talk from and think from. So I hit that point probably 2 years ago where it just felt like it's impossible to do what I do at the pace at which I want to do and serve my team, the customers, but probably most importantly, honestly, my family. It just seemed wrong and completely out of my normal comfort zone. So we made a decision at that time, and I'm grateful for the board and everybody who kind of played a part in it, where I went from having marketing, sales, customer success reporting into me to having 0 direct reports. And that was a big shift for me. It took me about 6 months to go through this self-denial, the idea of maybe I can't do it. Maybe I'm not cut out for it, to maybe I need help, to maybe I failed, all those scenarios, right? It took me about 6 months of personal therapy, if you will, to realize that no, what just happened was that I let go of things that I don't need to do and start doing the things that I love to do that can have the most impact on the business as well as my personal life. And now that it's been 2 years, I feel like, oh my God, pinch me, because I don't know if this is a reality if I ever get to do where I get to write books, I get to speak, which are the passion areas of me. I get to interview, I get to do things like this. And I don't have to constantly think about and I don't envy Sam's position, for example, of constantly looking at the numbers. I do obviously as a co-founder, but I have a ton of respect for operators right now than ever before. And I feel like it is realizing your strength and realizing that you might have to let go, not giving up, but letting go, and to use and change your mindset and reframing. For me, from now I'm not failing at this, I'm letting go of it, was a huge thing for me. That was like the largest or the longest jump I ever did in my life. And as soon as I got to that point, I think everything just changed. I just became way more effective, way more confident, and just started to own what I do good. Because until that point, I was just trying to play these 2 different roles that was just a recipe for disaster.
So the application of letting go, not just talking about letting go, but you were able to actually find some balance. So yeah, let me go back to and just dig in a little bit. So you talked about that first month being extra challenging, and the idea of how do you do this? And I've tried in my own life to find balance and waxed and waned with that. And I think in a lot of ways, we define ourselves by our job, and we define ourselves by the things we have and all of these outside things, until we realize that none of that actually fuels us, right? It's the balance, it's the moderation of all those things. But for me, going through the process of finding that balance and moderation, I had a struggle with my own self-esteem because I was so tied up in I'm managing this great team of people, or the business is doing this, or the business is doing that. How were you able to fight those internal messages, and what did you lean on for strength to get through it?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I'm still struggling. Like, I'm not completely out of it, if that's of any indication. But there is such a thing as conscious leadership. For those who have heard about it and think about it, I think it really comes down to that, is realizing your self-worth and not letting others tell you what your self-worth is. So right now, yeah, maybe for someone who is a co-founder or CEO or CMO or whatever, their self-worth right now could be in their role. And as soon as that role is taken away, they got nothing. And that's a really scary place. I don't want to be in that place. Right now, I feel like I've gone away from that, where the role didn't really matter anymore to me. Like I was able to come out of it recognizing that the role was what actually was forcing me and limiting me and putting pressure on me. And now that I'm not in the role, the beauty of what I do is that, okay, we just acquired a company, talking about opportunities that Sam just mentioned. We just acquired Ramble Chat 4 weeks ago. So I was able to shift and focus on that as a project. And that's a really key word that I've started to use a lot more. Instead of looking at your job as something that you're going to have legacy on, I'm just looking at that as a project. At this given point, my job is to be the chief evangelist of Terminus and do the best work of my life while serving customers, things, and my family, period. But that's not what people are going to see. Hopefully in my eulogy, when I die, I don't think people are going to say he was an amazing co-founder of a company called Terminus. I don't think anybody's ever going to say that. They're going to probably say, and hopefully, that he was kind and he was inspired, he provided, he led a great life, he supported, he cared for people. That's what we all know. We all want to hear about or say about other people. So I think your self-identity and self-worth, I think is worth taking the time to figuring out, is my self-worth tied to my job? Does that now become my identity? That's a problem, because we would end up really suffocating the best of us that's inside of us. And as soon as my self-worth is actually not in this, but right now I'm going to do everything to do the best work of my life, because this is what God has gifted me with to work on, and just do the best you can. That's my advice. That's how I'm trying to get out of it.
Inspiring words. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. Brian, we're users of Ambition at ringDNA. The product is all about motivating people and helping deliver better results and coaching. How do you motivate during these times of change and crisis?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. I think that who's doing it is a big part of it. Thank you for the kind words about our product, but it's ultimately about the leaders and how they transfer their personality and their view and their energy to the reps. And I think the people on your team have to be intrinsically motivated, intrinsically inspired to deliver and execute as well. And it goes back to what we said before. I think there's got to be a lot of transparency and as much honesty as possible in that kind of paradigm of here's what's happening, here's what we need to do, here's how we're going to do it. I think the least motivating thing, maybe to take a different route here, is that you can demotivate people by not trusting them enough and by not giving them enough visibility into what's happening. And so, we are coming off a week where we did performance reviews with everyone in the company. Those are really weird right now. Normally we do performance reviews and we've got a couple quarters of success and we've been in the office or we're seeing people somewhere. That's all weird. And I think it's really important. And the 3 I've done today, it's all been parents. It's all been parents whose kids are not at school, who all of their life has been turned upside down. And I think it's important, I'm not going to out anyone that I was talking to, but is motivating for them to have a place that supports them right now. And Ambition is that place, and Ambition is a shared mission that even with everything that's going on in their personal life, just a piece of the pandemic is giving them a place to be successful and have opportunity and to do good work. And so, we continue to try to make it clear what those challenges of what that good work looks like and how that good work aggregates into the success story that's the company. And so for us, it's as providing as much trust into our people as possible, giving them as much, as much creativity, as much room to showcase those abilities, all within the same vision. So there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of making it very measurable, trying to do things on a short feedback cycle, and talking about it a lot.
Yeah. Hey, Howard, if I could just jump in there real quick, because I think Brian, you touched on a really, really important point that I'm starting to see, and I'm reading a lot about it, especially in the last 2 weeks. So I wrote it down and don't want to gloss over that. So real quick, I think the 3 things that I'm seeing talked about more now than ever before are trust, safety, and care. Trust, safety, and care. Like, can I trust your vision? Can I trust you as a person? Can I trust you as a brand? All that. Are you going to keep the environment safe where I feel like it's safe? My job is safe. This conversation is safe. The community is safe. And then do you really personally care about me and my brand? Like, I think so, those 3 things. And what's interesting is like, well, those should have always been important.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that until this all happened, I think the thing that was really big was, I don't know if you ever saw those videos on YouTube sometimes that have ads like, hey, I'm on a beach making $1 million, or somebody taking all those, all those are just like bad, right? Like, people are like, I don't care about that. I know this is hoax, but somehow, and 4 months ago, that was the way. Winning. We got to win at all costs, or I'm going to make a lot of money. All that success is like, so the definition has changed. So the motivations are going back to those 3. So I just didn't want to miss that, because you use the word trust, and I wanted to make sure that the trust, safety, and care seems to be the thing that's starting to be the foundation of the next wave of whatever leadership looks like in an organization.
Sangram, I think that's so key right now, and I'll riff for a second, but I'm fascinated by what makes great teams successful, and some of the most obvious examples are sports teams, and it's, the best teams are when you allow people to be themselves to the utmost, ability within the realms of the team confine. You give people clear accountability, and then you're just continually supporting them and giving them the opportunity to go execute. You trust them to go do it. And so there's like this, thinking about basketball, like, you have to have this ability to trust the people in your team to execute, but they have to do it in the most, true way to their character. And you can't just force people to be a robot and just do this thing. And now more than ever, everyone's dealing with a lot more than maybe we have been in the past, and all kinds of external forces. And so I think giving that space is critical.
Yeah, Brian, you talked about how the parents that work for you, that have children at home, their lives are turned upside down.
Sure.
And I think you're really speaking to context and empathy, right? You're speaking to the fact that you are trying to understand the unique situation that they are going through. And as individuals, we're all going through unique experiences. And one of the things that I talk about quite a bit around ringDNA is the idea that bring value to every discussion, bring empathy, ask questions. As salespeople, our job is to help people solve problems. We may not be the best application for them or solution, but at least be helpful and point them in that right direction. And I think applying that same caring, empathetic, thoughtful, rapport building to our own teams, to our own people, trying to understand, look, I can't enter a conversation with one of my employees if I don't understand the fact that they have 2 teenagers at home or 2 5-year-olds that are bouncing off the walls. It's hard for me to manage in and of itself. But if I don't know anything about them, then I can't build that trust. I can't build that rapport, and I can't come from a place of compassion. And I think I want to bounce it over to you, Sam. What are those areas of your personality or leadership style that has best helped you during this time of crisis? What are you managing with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think they actually, both the things that pop into my head kind of come back to some of the points that the other guys were making just there. The first is that I generally think that I'm quite a calm and level-headed type of leader. You know, when everyone else is losing their heads, I generally keep mine. And I think that that's incredibly important, especially when you're running, in my case, a sales organization through a tough time, right? You need your ICs, you need your direct reports, you need the managers that roll up to you to be able to look at you and go, okay, looks like he has this under control. Like, it looks like this is not creating drama or panic in the way that he's looking at the business or the business outlook or an individual deal. People need to know that you're not getting ruffled, or that you have it under control. And I think that that's, if you can do that in one hand, but also be empathetic that we're not all the same, and make sure that you're looking at the world through other people's eyes, not just your own, and you can bring those two things together. I think that's a winning combination when you're trying to lead through a challenging time. Because absolutely not everyone sees the world through my eyes, and everyone has got a different perspective and everyone has got a different life circumstance right now. But if they can see that you are taking things in your stride, while at the same time making time to really understand what's happening in their life, I think that's a winning combination right now.
I love that. Sangram, flip it on you. What are the areas of your personality that may be liabilities, that present challenges for you in managing?
Wow. I'm a full-on liability every day for my organization.
You're in good company, man.
I'm 100% liability in my company. As a matter of fact, every C-level person I think is a liability in the organization for all intents and purposes. But I know that I'm a dreamer at heart, which means I spout out 100 ideas a day. And I dream, and that's my greatest liability. I remember I think in the very early days, we used to bring in as we started 10, 12 people, maybe 15. And I'm like, yeah, come on in, let's just talk about ideas. And we'll come up with ideas. And Monday, the session was great. I did that again on Tuesday. And the same people showed up. It was great. Third day, only half the people showed up. And by Friday, it was just me and my ideas, right? And I realized that I'm like, oh my God, that's the quickest way to lose your people, lose your credibility, and because you're not delivering on anything and they're already working on 2 and you talk about 4. So my greatest challenge is, how do I run and do the things that I want to do and test and experiment, which I think as an entrepreneur, we all want to do all the time, but not to an extent where you burn people off. Like you get them running in 50 directions. People need a steady, like Sam said, a steady head of all right, here's where we're going. Yes, we can change the mind, but then this is where we're going, not like this. So, and I think that's why I have a huge respect for operators. So for me, because I have this crazy mind, I have to constantly share with people hey, I got ideas. I don't expect anybody to work on it. I don't expect this to be prioritized, but some of this is good. And I realize that I don't share all those ideas with everybody in the organization. There are 2 or 3 people with whom I can vomit all the ideas. They know me and I know them. There's trust there. And they're like, oh man, that's great. But if it still bothers you for next 3 days or 3 weeks, let's talk about that. That's the best advice I ever got. Is okay, and 3 weeks later, I've forgotten about that idea, right? So if it bothers you for longer than 3 weeks, it is the idea that I think I would go back and say, hey, let's talk about this. It's really bothering.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you the same question, Brian. What parts of your personality are a liability during these challenging times, and how do you work through that?
Oh, quite a bit. I would say, a significant percentage of it, as my wife would say. I think one of the things, it's so easy to say that we have this empathy and we have these we're building this trust. And it's very easy to say that from here with 3 people who don't have to work with me every day. I've had to learn all of that stuff, and it's been learning by making a lot of mistakes. And I think a strength and a weakness of my co-founders Travis and Jared and I is that when things get hard and when it gets crazy and we have to go in the foxhole, like we can really go into the foxhole, we can lock it in, and we can be like, let's zone in and we're just going to get through this. But that's not that doesn't scale, and that doesn't scale with people who are going through life. And so as much as me personally I can do that, I have to get out there to where it's a little bit uncomfortable for me to have those personal conversations with people and open myself up, because it's not just a one-way conversation to say, tell me all of your what's going on in your life without anything coming back from my end. So I think that we have in some ways it serves us really well that we can lock in and we can be hyper mission driven. But at the same time, we've had to learn that every salesperson, every engineer, every customer success person in mission is not like that. They're not going to work like that. They need more support. So, humanizing ourselves, definitely humanizing me and being willing to be vulnerable to gain that trust from them is something I'm learning and I'm working on, and I think I'm understanding a little bit, but it takes time.
Yeah. Well, I definitely see it. And I wouldn't have invited you on this panel to talk about transparency and leadership if I didn't experience it firsthand from you.
People are just poking me in the company all the time and like, hey, a little bit less. So I'm taking some feedback.
So one thing that I'm experiencing through this remote work experience is, look, we're all on Zoom, right? We're doing this virtual event. Zoom's become an incredible tool, but it's also an incredible challenge, right? We have Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting where, quite frankly, I think a lot of times people are misreading other people's body language. They may be misreading their face. You could be presenting an idea that you think is profound and exciting, and the other people are on Slack reading something else or responding to an SMS message, and they look over at your face and you look like you're not interested whatsoever. What have you done to sort of counterbalance this Zoom experience and communication where we're not able to be in the same room? We're talking about trust, and what tools have you utilized to help with that? And I'd throw it out to anybody in this group to answer it.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Howard. It's I think, frankly, if we didn't have Zoom, I don't know how. I'm not quite sure how we would have worked through this change. I mean, it's clearly a big part of how I think we're all working right now. That said, it definitely does come with some challenges, especially around the fact that everything has to be scheduled. You can't just lean over and say, get someone's idea or jump in a conference room and talk something through. Everything has to be scheduled on Zoom meetings. And actually in the prep for this call, we had a conversation. I think you were talking about your sales leader taking one-on-ones over the phone.
Yep.
And I thought, what a great idea. And so that was about a week ago, and I've been doing it ever since. Trying to hop on calls, just walking, taking a walk with the dog, and just being on a good old-fashioned telephone where I've got nothing to do apart from focus on the conversation that I'm having right now. I'm not in a sauna. I'm not checking my email. I'm right with that person in the moment, having a conversation, taking a walk around the block. So that's something that I've just been doing in the past week, and it's enormously effective. So yeah, I definitely promote that to anyone who's looking to find a way to make sure that you're having really authentic and in the moment conversations with people.
Yeah, I'd reiterate that point. Trust, compassion, empathy are really challenging when you're multitasking.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like all multitasking right now. I think that's such a good point. I had to make a long car ride the other day, and I took 3 normal Zoom calls on the call, just dialed in, and I was so much more locked in, just driving and just talking on these calls. I'm like, that was so refreshing. I wasn't on Slack the whole time. My brain is focused as much on driving a little bit as talking. And I think that's such a good point, Sam. Another thing is like that we've learned, and I don't have all the answers to fix it, but doing Slack for hard conversations does not work well. And like nuanced conversation where you really have to your point, Howard, not just read the words someone typed, but what do they mean? What does it mean for me? How am I interpreting versus how they want it to be interpreted? And we're trying, I think, in a variety of different methods to break that habit, which was harsh feedback or, full truth in Slack. And it's like, we've got to take that contextual conversation somewhere else. The phone is better, Slack is good, and figure out how to do those things that should be done or are historically done face-to-face, eye-to-eye, but are not happening right now.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. Conflict resolution, right? Like we all have struggles, we all have challenges. Our teams are challenged with each other. We're working remote, a lot of us. How are the rest of you dealing with conflict resolutions? Any tips to give those folks out there?
Well, I would just go in and say, well, conflict resolution is hard to resolve in a already conflicting things, right? Like we're all thinking like, well, we need to be empathetic. We said that word probably 50 times if we go and look at it transcribed. And then we're like, but we got to have hard conversations. What is the quota that we need to have so that we can reforecast and tell the board it's a hard conversation? Do we need to let go of certain people at certain point because we know we can't keep that? That's hard conversation. Solidifying our financials so that we know we don't, if this continues, that we don't have to continue to do more riffs as an organization. It's a hard conversation. So any and all of those are hard. What I've found and what we in our organization is that we are just having this daily stand-up at the leadership meeting at leadership level every day. And it sometimes initially it was an hour kind of thing when it all started because we're all checking in, we're all confused, we're all trying to figure it out. Now it's like 10, 15 minutes, right? Like we're having 10, 15 minutes of like, hey, just checking in, all of us, all leadership level, talking, all right, here's what I'm working on, here's my issue. Okay, that one, let's just set up a meeting to what Brian said, because that's a bigger topic between three of us. But the other ones, like we just know that we're all in it together. Like that, no matter how much you say in your Friday note to the organization, how much you write it up, it's like you need to demonstrate that in a meaningful and clear way. So having this daily stand-up at the leadership level allows the next second level and the third, every single level to like have the same. So we started to see, we didn't say anybody to do it, but we started to see everybody do that more and more, and it just connects. The communication is just flowing. But the hard conversations, we're like, all right, that one, we need to take it out and have a separate conversation on it and not try to make it part of the whole conversation. It's too hard to make it.
Sam, any words to impart?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is all of this, especially constructive or difficult conversations, so much easier to have if you've got a strong culture in the first place. Right now, you can't go back in time and whatever was happening, prior to the pandemic and create this wonderful culture if you don't already have it. But it's certainly been something that has been really beneficial for me at Sendoso because we do have a culture of open communication. I can't think of a single leader in the organization who leads, who is unable to have those challenging conversations. And we have, it's certainly not radical candor, but we do have an environment where people feel open to talk about difficult things. Now that process becomes a lot more difficult when we're only looking at each other over screens, for sure. But it certainly means that you've got a foundation on which you can have those conversations. I think the second thing is as much as we've all talked about empathy and as much as we've all talked about understanding other people, it's important not to let things slide. And I mean, that's just a general rule, I think, for all good leaders, but especially in these times, like if something needs to change or if a conversation needs to be had and it's Friday afternoon and you think, you know what, maybe this could wait till Monday. Like, you know, it can't wait till Monday. Have the conversation now. Because if anything, if you have a challenging situation and you're unable to see people, you know, in person, face to face on a regular basis, that challenging situation is only going to fester and grow over time. And so, you know, making sure that you're not the passive aggressive leader, that you're having those conversations early, I think is absolutely imperative, especially when we're not next to each other to check in with each other and you can't read people's body language so well.
I highly recommend none of you call Sangram at 6:55 on a Friday evening, because if it goes south, you got to talk to his wife on the weekends. You got to wait till Monday. It's a real challenge.
It is a real challenge. But like, people are like, wait a minute. So what if something happens? Well, I mean, you hopefully have my wife's number, and that's fine. If not, I don't know what will happen. But the funniest thing is, nothing happens like during that time. It's like, it's our own mental block, especially for me. But no, it's right. But Sam, to your point though, of I mean, it's like almost like the best couples advice as well as parenting advice, coupled with like work advice, I think, because if you don't have that level of direct, and I interviewed Kim Scott, the Radical Candor author, on the podcast, and I remember she talking about this idea where if your manager actually truly cares about you, they will have the conversation with you right then and there in a safe environment, so that you and they are like, you might feel like, oh my God, what's going on? But if they really care about you, then they will have the conversation. So I think you're right on the money on that.
So you brought up culture, and culture is something you can't create overnight. It's something that takes time. It has to be authentic. It has to be nurtured. Some of our teams out there are growing, and we're bringing people into the organization during a remote period of time. How have you been able to orient people into the culture, get them involved in the organization, the feelings of the organization, the values of the organization, while doing it remotely? And have you been able to do it effectively? I'll throw it up to any of you to jump in on that.
So for March, we were on a hiring tear, especially in the go-to-market side of our business. So I increased the headcount of both new business sales and account management by roughly 50% in a 3 or 4 month period. So, you know, a large part of my team is still ramping today. I think that I'll divide it into two. Firstly is, how do I ramp those people successfully and teach them how to be successful salespeople at Sendoso? So the skills and the knowledge that they might have picked up by osmosis, sitting with more tenured salespeople in an office in San Francisco or Scottsdale. How do I replicate that experience? That's a challenging thing to do, and it's done by FaceTime more than anything. My sales teams are meeting. So firstly, I have an exec stand-up, as Sangram was talking about, but we also have a morning kickoff with the sales team, which is a healthy mix of talking about what's happening and talking about deals and talking about the tactics of how we're going to be successful, but also talking about, just what's going on in your life. We started off the first week of these calls. We did cribs where we had salespeople walking around with their laptops showing us around their apartments or their houses. So it's a good mix of kind of the personal and the professional. The second thing we've been doing is a lot of what we call film reviews. So listening to calls, making sure that we're just having those conversations, and not led by me and not led by sales managers, but rep to rep conversations about, I've had that type of call before, or I've run into that use case before, or here's the value that this customer most sees when they engage with Sendoso. Sure, managers drive a lot of those conversations, but rep to rep is so powerful right now. So we're doing a lot of that work just to create those touch points between different sales professionals to help with that sort of organic learning process. And then the other thing from a culture standpoint, and this is definitely, huge credit to our HR team and the guys that, and also the co-founders of our company from which pretty much all of our culture descends. We're doing weekly all hands meetings. We do daily challenges on Slack across the entire company. And it's a lot of what Brian was talking about earlier, being open and transparent about why decisions are being made. Being open and transparent about the high level stuff that's going on in boardrooms and in the exec room. That creates a culture that brings people in, even if they're new, and it makes them understand that they're part of something that is bigger than they are, but yet they get to really contribute to that, even if they're brand new. So yeah, it's something that I've been really proud of our company, both from a skills and learning standpoint, but also embracing new people. We seem to be doing a good job so far.
Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I would simply say it keeps me up at night. How we're bringing these people in, and we owe it to them to try to make them as successful as possible when they take a chance on us right now. And so part of that's very similar to what Sam's saying. We have, depending on the team, different processes, but specifically on the sales side, we're doing book-in stand-ups for some of those teams daily. So it's a pre-day meeting of what do you want to do, what are you concerned about, how can we share best practices, end of the day, what happened, how did it go. Hopefully there's a lot of collaboration there. And go back to our kind of core belief, which is that the more you can make it objective and the more you can make clear metrics and clear expectations and goalposts and points along the journey for someone to being fully ramped and productive, the better it is. Because right now there's so much out of the norm of how we're ramping people. I haven't met many of these people in face-to-face. I've never seen them. That's very weird for us. So you feel like you don't have the same level of connection. But if I can get on a call with someone and say, you hit X metric, Y metric, you did these things, these actions have been checked off, and that's great. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. You're doing a great job. At least we have that, and we can build something. But yeah, we've, especially on the sales and go-to-market side, we've grown more than I would have planned going into a pandemic. And at the end of the day, what we continue to say is we think that we hired the right people, and we're going to continue to invest in those people, pandemic or no pandemic.
Those are some great suggestions. Something that's worked for us and for me personally is my investment in individuals has far exceeded the amount that I might have done prior. So we bring new people in. I'm spending a lot of one-on-one time with them, but it's not just me. It's the entire leadership team. It's working cross department. So make sure everybody is spending time with people one-on-one. Marketing's talking to product, talking to support and HR, making sure people get one-on-one time across the organization makes everybody feel like they're a part of, because it's really easy to get into your silos while working remotely. And even though you may do an all hands, there are people who may not have the opportunity to spend time together. So whatever you can do to encourage that connection as broadly as possible has proven pretty darn successful for ringDNA. And so we're running out of time. I have one really important question that I want to ask everybody, and that's, for me, it's always important to have people who I trust, who I feel like I can talk openly to as leaders, as founders. It can get lonely. And so who are the people that you lean on, the mentors in your life, and how do you work with them to make sure you're keeping it straight?
I can go first. It definitely has been in the early days, my co-founders, and as you have grown now and having a board and all that stuff. But I have a lot of founders and CEOs outside of our organization that I lean on, because to your point, Howard, everybody's lonely in these roles. People don't see the other side of it. when everything is going good and you get to do the all hands and all that stuff, you do customer in the office, all these programs, you see the rah-rah behind all of it. But when all is said and done, it's literally you and maybe a couple of others and making some of the decisions that can impact a ton of people. And there's a lot of weight that comes with it. So I have, fortunately, and I feel like in some way everybody is starting to do that more of, have three, I think four founders and CEOs of other organizations that we just have our own group, and we'll just text each other anytime, like, hey, I gotta talk to you today, or I need some help, I need to vent, like, the stuff is not working, I don't get what's going on, my board said this and I don't know how to respond. Like, these are conversations you just can't have in a public segment. Talk about vulnerability. It doesn't work going to in front of your company, I don't know how to answer my board. Right? Like, that's not vulnerability. Like, that's nobody in the organization wants you to say that. Right? So people we have to define what it means in many cases. So you need that group. And one thing I didn't do, which I do more of now, is that I didn't share a lot with my wife in the early days. I just try to keep it separate. And honestly, business is personal more than ever. And now the boardrooms are turned into living rooms, right? So, the living rooms are turned into with my daughter's unicorn. So it's, all these things are just happening. So you gotta have to create that trusted partner. And I've started sharing a lot more what's going on and not with my wife. And honestly, that has been a huge weight lifted off my shoulder.
Either of you guys have been?
Yeah, I think that, similar to Sangram, I'm talking to fellow co-founders, I'm talking to fellow, folks who have started companies. But for me, outside of Travis and Jared, who are in it every day, we have to be, I feel like we're more aligned than we ever have, once again, being locked in right now. One thing that's been really useful for me to not be buried under that weight that Sangram mentioned is to get outside of this bubble. And even though it's a huge industry and there's so many folks, we can get really, we can talk ourselves into anything by saying, here's what the other VC funded crowd is, or here's what the other SaaS companies are doing, and why can't we do X or Y? The best is to, the guy next to me owns a restaurant. Like he's got some challenges. Like the, person across the street has a construction company. Like he's got challenges. So getting outside of my bubble, having some perspective, that's been really healthy for me, because while we definitely have challenges, we have some things that I wish we did better. I'm in a great position. I have a great opportunity, and I think that that's been important for me to have that gratitude and to have that visibility into, what's happening in the world to everyone experiencing this right now.
Sam?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the other guys' answers. Firstly, fortunately, or maybe not fortunately, my wife followed a very similar career path to mine, which means the end of quarter is always an interesting time in our household. So she's always been a mentor and a resource and someone who I can bounce ideas off. Also, very fortunately at Sendoso, we've built a fantastic lineup of advisors from customers and from industry and investors, and obviously, people that are close to our board, and I've got to leverage some of those relationships. And then I think the other group, and this might sound a little bit, maybe it's the wrong way around, but it's certainly a group that I find have really supported me and can empathize with me and really hold me up during a difficult time, are my direct line, first line sales managers. I think those guys who are kind of in the weeds every day, who frankly have been at the company for longer than I have, and who I find constantly are able to inspire me and constantly are able to support me in what I'm doing. I try to have as many conversations with those guys as I can, bounce ideas off where I can. And sure, as Sangram said, I'm not going to say, hey, what do you think we should say to the board this month? But there are all sorts of places where they can be my mentors as well. And so looking for mentorship both up and sideways and down, I feel incredibly supported and lucky right now.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time, being transparent, and for quite frankly, inspiring me. This has been fabulous. Hopefully everybody will get something from this. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you so much for taking the time.
That was such a fun conversation. Thank you, guys.
All right, good seeing you all. Have a fantastic week.
Stay safe, everyone.